playfulness and curiosity.
This new superpower called persuasion.
They're the rules of the world, and then here's the rules for us.
What does rich mean?
Stories and wisdom.
Welcome to the Stories and Wisdom podcast. Today we are joined by Carla Bevins, Associate Teaching Professor of Business Management Communication at Carnegie Mellon Stepper School of Business. Welcome to the podcast, Carla.
Pradeep, thank you so much for having me today.
You help leaders and students master the art of clear, confident, authentic communication, blending principles with the latest in technology, including generative AI, I hear. So really excited about that.
Thank you. I'm really excited to share some of my stories and talk a little bit more about the work that I'm doing right now.
So for people who are new to your work, what first drew you to business communication? And why is it so critical for leaders right now?
I really do speak from the perspective of being an educator, a business communicator. And I think one of the things that really drew me to this is always being in a place where I was sharing ideas with others and trying to translate these ideas across different contexts. And that's one of the things I think that really drew me into education. And for leaders today, I think one of the most important things is being authentic in who you are as your own speaker, right? I talk with a lot of my students, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in executive education, about finding your own authentic voice. And I don't want you to sound like me, right? I mean, one of me, trust me, is more than enough. And what I want you to do is be able to find your own voice. And when you're able to do that, you're able to step into that leadership position, step into being a true communicator within business that allows you to talk about a whole variety of topics to different types of people, whether they're experts in the field, whether they're new to an area. It really helps you have these conversations that are much richer, and also to create some of those times where you have points where there's those aha moments that a lot of times wouldn't happen otherwise. And so I think back a bit to where this all started. And I'm going to take us back, if you don't mind, quite honestly, about 24 years ago. I was 22 years old, and I had just started my teaching career at the University of Kentucky. I was going to be a teaching assistant for one of the other professors. And 3 days before classes started, I was told, no, you're going to teach your own class. And I went, what? I was handed a syllabus and told, you now have 25 students to teach public speaking to. Wow, that was not something I had on my bucket list, anything. And I walked into the classroom cold. But I figured it out. And I think that is one of the biggest pieces that has brought me through into being an educator all of these years, is that semester was a challenge and I figured it out. It was also fall of 2001. So I literally graduated from college in May, got married in June, started grad school and teaching in August, and then September 11th happened. And I had been teaching for a little over a month when this happened in the classroom. We dealt with it. We didn't know what we were doing. But one of the things that happened that evening, I decided that I was going to be completely different from the class that I had. I had a professor that evening who didn't even acknowledge that 9/11 was happening that day. And I was quite honestly so disheartened by the lack of empathy for the students. We were all struggling with the events of the day, that I vowed right then and there to create that open and supportive learning community, that learning environment always. And I have, whether it's in an academic classroom, industry training, or just talking with friends and colleagues, creating that environment where everyone has that opportunity to speak, to be heard, and to learn in the ways that work for them. And that's something that I have brought with me throughout my professional career. Education is something that I'm passionate about. I'm probably one of the few people who actually is doing exactly what they want to be doing. And I love the position that I'm in as an educator. And quite honestly, this takes me back to those roots a little bit. But every semester, as we get started for new classes, it reminds me, each time I walk into a classroom, it's a new group of students, it's a new group of experiences, and I really appreciate being able to a lot of times learn as much from the students as I hope that they do from me. But it takes me back to that first time I walked into the classroom. Quite honestly, many of my students were older than I was. And just being able to find my own authentic voice. It took a while, and there were a lot of people who've helped me along the way, a lot of support. And in doing that, have helped me become the educator that I am today and that I share with really anyone who walks into my classroom.
Brilliant. That's a great story on like what drew you to business communication. And I'm going to take us into our first segment. You already went there, but this is called Memoir Moment. So in Memoir Moment, we talk about origin stories, but because you already started talking about 9/11, so that's when I was in grad school. So I did that July that you were talking about. That's when I came to Pittsburgh, and this was at Carnegie Mellon Tepper School of, it's not the Tepper School of Business then, it was GSIA. And I do remember the moment, the educator there, that was Dr. Denise Rousseau, who still teaches at Tepper and the Heinz School of Public Policy. And she paused, and her words, I still remember, was just like, all of you look around, you're going to remember who you're sitting with in this moment. Class is done for today. You guys do what we'll have to do. And for others who are still figuring out what's going on, we're all here together. And then it was just paused. So I remember that specifically because it was the opposite of what happened to you that led you to make that wow. And I remember specifically going as like, here is somebody who I think is going through a moment where it was not a leadership class, but she was showing leadership without it being a leadership class. And I felt like the clarity and empathy with which Dr. Rousseau was sharing that is a story I've shared a lot of times. I want to bring that in, it's like my memoir moment. But because you went there, are there in your business communication journey that you want to share that preceded this? Or is it after that you have taken that vow again and again? Or is there another origin story that you want to share for your current path?
Yeah, I think for me, I expected there to be empathy in the classroom that evening. And when it didn't happen, I was so shocked that it did make such an impact in me that it has traveled with me throughout all of my teaching. And if I wanted to share maybe another example of this, we had several years ago here in Pittsburgh with Tree of Life, or even with when there are natural disasters or crises that are happening, whether it's in the local community or on a worldwide level. There are many examples that we could speak to. I'll take it two different ways. From a business communication standpoint, as a communicator, and when you're dealing with anything from a crisis communication standpoint, always recognizing that we're talking with people and we're always going to have that emotional reaction just before we have that logical one. And so responding in a way, if you are the communicator, responding in a way that reminds us that we are talking with people. And I can go back into the classroom on multiple different occasions when something has happened and there's been a trauma in our world. I can think back again, several years ago to the Tree of Life here in Pittsburgh. Very terrorizing event. I was 1 mile from where that happened and didn't know for quite some time whether even some of my friends were still with us. And going back into the classroom the next day, there was no way I was going to do a lesson on whatever we were talking about in our business communications course, right? What we did instead is we spent time talking about and just giving space for, yes, this is a stressor. Yes, how are we feeling? What's going on? And literally going back to the communication theory, quite honestly, of when you name and talk about an emotion and how you are feeling, it helps us to actually process it in a different way. A lot of times they say, don't talk about it. No, for me, it's just the opposite. It's giving space, getting it out of your head and into the world and finding out that a lot of students were feeling the same way. Others were feeling very differently. And just also talking about, okay, in your other classes, how are you addressing this? And they're like, we aren't. Like, okay. And so giving that time and that space, but also tying it into a communication framework that they can then take with them into an internship, into work that they're going to be doing. And so I didn't really realize the language at the time, but I was helping them build resiliency and being curious and being agile. And these are terms that I really more actively tie into my education now. And as I'm working in the classroom or working with students and with business communicators and really teaching them about framing your message in a way that allows you to be focused and other-centered. And that allows that conversation really to happen. Listen first and then share your own ideas with it. And so I think that is something that was an outcropping from the lack of conversation that happened in the classroom on 9/11 with the professor that I was with, and just finding many different opportunities to be that empathetic, open, challenging. Yes, don't get me wrong on that one. Many of my students will say I'm very challenging, but having that empathy and openness for creating that learning environment wherever we are, that you can not only survive, but thrive. And so I think that really kind of has been a thread that has brought me through to really the core of how I teach today.
So what you're telling us, Carla, is in a business communication class, you sneak in leadership and setting an environment where everybody can thrive and grow and think and care for each other, like team management and team engagement, which has nothing to do with the metrics of business in terms of finance. It's like take care of the people and then the business can take care of it. And communication is the means with which you're helping people get there. Like that I see is the pattern that you brought with all of your stories. Is that?
It's very true. And quite honestly, I create assignments around it so that we can formalize it and we can put language with it and we can practice. So we do team projects. We do different ways of building. What type of a leader are you? What type of different settings do you thrive in? Are you someone who likes to take that first leadership role? Are you someone who likes to listen and then eventually bring your ideas to the table? Are you someone who likes to poke at the different ideas? So yes, it's kind of that value added piece that is just there and woven into, well, quite honestly, now that you talk about it, every class that I teach, there's going to be some type of little, you say, leadership lesson kind of baked in to any of the business communication that I talk about. I don't think you can do effective business communication without it.
It's similar to what we have done because we looked at similar ideas and then just went with like, let's design a product that can help in the system and without having to get to a teaching class, just like let's leverage and enable these conversations and allows people with different personality and communication styles to share with agency how much ever they want to share because the psychological safety to share, some might feel super vulnerable currently on a specific topic. Others might open up on that topic. And even there's cultural differences, gender differences. There's a whole lot of ways that affect how people want to communicate at that moment, given the group around them. The same person in a different context, a different group, might act differently, and personality is just one approach. It's fascinating that you're bringing that in a communication class, but I see like it's leadership all over what you're doing right there. I want us to take us to our next segment, which is Vision Venture. The current technology is about let's do things faster, quicker, and let's automate a whole lot of things. And of course, I am speaking AI to be one big aspect of it. And you have brought in a lot about let's pause, listen, reflect, connect, and almost slow down the thinking and pace so that the team is building, as the word you use, resiliency. In the world of AI, as you're bringing in, is this helping? And how do we leverage the technology, or is it hindering? What is your take on it? And how are you thinking about your vision for your classes or your business communication classes for the cohorts to come in the future?
Oh, Pradeep, I am so glad that you brought this up because it's something that for the last couple of years, I've really been wrestling with. I mean, as someone who started their career, way, way back as an English major and creative writing, public relations, I learned to process by handwriting things, right? And obviously I type and speak it out loud much more so now. But as Gen AI and even into agentic AI has been coming, just flooding us in the classroom, at first I'm going, wait, what do I do with this? And then I got really curious and I got excited. I went, ooh, this is a fun chance to start coding. And I got behind it a little bit. And what I have done is quite honestly, I've welcomed it into the classroom with the very clear communication pathways around it. So there are some really good boundaries that I've put together with it. I have actually a couple different grants that I'm working with through CMU. One's with the Eberly Center, one is with our Center for Intelligent Business, looking specifically at how we can use AI to help ourselves, like help the students be more effective with their critical thinking skills. Because as you know, as we've talked more and more about AI, Gen AI, I mean, we've read the stories about our brains are just melting, right? And less of that cognitive work is potentially happening. I said, no, I really think that there's an opportunity here. AI is a tool, and it's very much about how we use it. And so the way that I've brought it into the classroom is not so much to create content, but as a way to help give feedback on content that's already been created. And so for the social media elective that I teach, that's exactly what we were doing this past semester, and creating content and using different metrics and tools within AI to create better and more effective messaging that's going out to, again, very specific audiences. Anyone who's taken one of my classes will hear for the rest of their lives, know your target audience. And it's very much about knowing that target audience and the type of messaging that they need in order to make that decision. And so it's that decision-making process that we're helping using AI to help us with. I also bring in lots of different examples where I've created content and we evaluate it and say, okay, what do you think of this? Well, the tone's not quite right, or this is really flat, or this isn't particularly clear. I said, which one did I write? Which one did the AI write? And after we've been in class for a few weeks, the students usually can tell, thank goodness, pretty quickly which ones are AI written. And they start to be able to analyze and be able to see how AI can help and where they need to start. And so it's very much about, my classes are very much focused on what we can do outside the classroom. They're focused on a little bit sprinkling of theory, and then very much how can we use these tools in the work that you're going to be doing. Everyone's using AI. I would be absolutely remiss if I weren't teaching my students how to effectively use it. So for me, I'm really excited about seeing how it's growing, being at the cutting edge on the education side of how we can best use these tools to help our students refine the messages that they're creating, learn how to be even deeper thought makers with their critical thinking, and create those messages that, again, are going to connect people even more so. And so I can't wait to see what's coming next. And we're going to keep right on going with the research and the content within the classroom as far as I'm concerned. So yes, I'm a little excited about this.
It is very exciting to actually see you get excited by this, because AI is a disruptor. There is no going around it. But at the place at which you're looking at it with excitement, saying, well, we can't fight this. We have to embrace this and then leverage this and make us even better in what we can be. And it's not just the do it faster, it's the do it better and iterate even more, get the feedback loops going on. And that feels like even value accrual, not just to the individual, but then the organizations they're leading. So it's very exciting to have you think through that. I'm going to take us to our next segment. This is, again, going back into the past. The segment is called Decision Do-Over. So in Decision Do-Over, you get to look at any decisions from the past and then see if this is a do-over that you'd want to go. It could be a class you've designed. It could be a career position. It could be anything else that you'd want to do. What is a decision that you'd want to have a do-over and why?
There are a lot of things in my career that have surprised me, maybe some decisions that I would want to have a chance to do over. But I think one that if I really had a chance to go back to, it would be a few years ago coming out of the pandemic. It still seems very close in a lot of ways, but I teach in person. I have a very dynamic classroom. If you've spent any time with me, you know I teach like it's an Olympic sport, right? And then we ended up shoved online within a couple weeks. And there was this whole idea of how do we take this in-person classroom and make it work online? I'm like, I've got this. I have a graduate certificate in distance education. I'm like, yes, okay, this I can handle. And it worked. Now, there was a lot that went with it. I have some sparkles in my hair now because of that. But, that worked. The thing that was a real challenge for me, and I think that I would maybe want a bit of a do-over on, is when we came back into the classroom, because I expected, and this was, I assumed, and I got myself into trouble with this, is that I assumed and expected that we would go right back to what was normal. And I started teaching the in-person classes just like I had been before we had gone online. And it didn't work. And I was really confused. I went, wait, why isn't this working? We're back in person. This is where we, really thrive. And if I had that chance, this is where I would do a do-over, because I wasn't really aware how much of those interpersonal relationships had come apart while we were online during the pandemic, and how much isolation had happened. And if I had a chance to go back and do that first semester in person over again, it would be to really think more carefully and be aware of how the students are doing, how they have changed, and realizing what works in one semester may not work in another semester. I mean, I've had classes where an activity wasn't working so well. I'll turn on a dime. I'll say, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll come back and I'll redo whatever the project was or whatever we were working on. But this one, it just kept digging at me, and it wasn't what we were expecting. The connections weren't there. The things that I was talking about, creating those teams, those leadership threads, even just the basic communication back and forth, there was a real disconnect. And it took me quite a while to figure out, first of all, what was going on, really process and understand it, and then really figure out what to do about it. And if I had the chance, I don't know that I could have done something a lot different, but I would have liked to have a better awareness and understanding coming back into the classroom, that all of our needs were different. And the pandemic and being online and being separated fundamentally changed how we communicate with each other. And it has been something that I have continued to incorporate in a substantial way in the coursework that I do, in the teaching and the training that I do, to create those interpersonal connection moments before really even moving into, okay, now here's the theory or the method that goes with whatever content piece we're working on. And so I know that that's maybe something smaller, particular for me, but really being able to go back to that and coming back into the classroom with a better framework and understanding that all of our needs, mine as well, I didn't even really realize how much I needed to reconnect. That needed to happen in order for us to kind of find ourselves back in person, in the classroom, even just, my gosh, even going to the grocery store and saying hi to someone, right? I had to learn how to people again and be around each other. And that was something that I wasn't prepared for. I think I would have liked a chance to maybe go back and process and maybe a little more carefully think about how I could help my students and provide support for all of us as we were coming back into this classroom that was so familiar to us a few years before, and that was now, quite honestly, a foreign entity. So yeah, that's an interesting one.
Thank you for that story. I relate with that in a very different way because I was on the Depper Alumni Board, and I think I met that context several years ago. And when we had the pandemic, and then when we were coming back on campus, because during the pandemic, our board meetings are all, of course, online. And the first time we were meeting students back again, it was the same expectation that you had. For decades, we've met students when we go back as alumni, and there was an engagement. But here, it suddenly felt, they were asking questions like, are you from Pittsburgh? I'm like, no, I live in Seattle. And they're like, wait, you flew from Seattle to Pittsburgh? I'm like, yeah. For a meeting? Yeah. This was a group who had not expected that alumni would come back. And then when I asked the questions about how are your career recruiting going, and they're like, oh, we just apply online. I'm like, of course you apply online, but don't you meet? And they said, oh, no, we just apply online. And because they had for years, and this was in their post-undergrad working, COVID had, if I had to reuse the words that you said, help them forget how to people. Now they were trying to reform how to connect. And as board members, we also learned, similar to how you realized that we had to help this cohort and ourselves go 2 steps back to bring them along, to learn the skills, and then we can get to where we are at, which was literally where we were 4 years ago. Like we had to go back a few times because even when I went to school, you learned it because the second years taught you and were part of the orientation. So when you were second year, you did that to the first years. And then when you're alum, you already had seen the alum, so you had a role model of what happened. COVID crushed all of that for some groups, and we had to realize we have to reform all of these connections that I didn't know was part of our role description. So I see you, I hear you, and I wanted to share that story to say that is not a personal small thing. That is something really important and a systemic. I haven't shared that story myself, but when your story came out, I was like, yep, we had this discussion and we realized it was a much bigger problem to solve that we had to now do for the community and our students. And it was a staff discussion and also with faculty to state that we have to recreate this alumni-student connection that has been severed because of the pandemic over the last few years and then rebuild the machine. So thank you for that story.
Pradeep, thank you for sharing as well, because, we really did have to pause and figure it out and take some time and understand where the students were coming from. And this challenge we didn't even know was there. All of a sudden, it's right in front of us that we needed to address something that had been, there and solid for years, evaporated. And we did put it back together.
I'm going to take us to our next segment. It's called Puzzle Point. In this puzzle point, I'm going to do something different than other puzzle points where I think we have a puzzle here that I'm going to offer you to explore, think this through, which is in the context of AI and how AI is now helping people think through, brainstorm, get feedback on, even used in some therapy kind of support structure to be that other voice on the shoulder which has access to data and a whole lot of other skills than any single person can by themselves provide. And this is at any point in time. So it sounds the superhuman entity that we have access to very quickly. Given that, the puzzle around will we continue to, or how might we people? Will we continue to people the same way as before, or how might we people? Or the fabric of social connection that COVID severed, and then we had to reform. With AI, I don't think it's a severance, but how are we going to reform the social connection of a team, an organization, leadership with communication? So I'm bringing back 2 points we discussed and then literally asking our puzzle point question is, how shall we people with AI?
Oh, I love that. And I think that needs to be a book we write right there. How shall we people with AI? We're going to keep that title. I'm so glad that you brought this up because this has been kind of a challenge and a question that I have been sitting with. And quite honestly, I don't have a real clear answer on it yet. But here's how I'm thinking about it. We are the ones who have created AI. We as people are the thought makers, the idea creators, the data that goes into it. It is all of us that is creating AI and will continue to do so. And I think one of the really neat things and positive things about where we're seeing AI going is just the depth and breadth of the human condition that we're seeing reflected back on us as we are working with AI. And I don't think we're ever going to forget how to people. What we need to do is go back to those basics and really think about who are we as communicators. I talk a lot about being your own authentic self, finding your own authentic voice, right? And as we continue to hold that as a core value and trait that we are teaching about, that's going to tie in with our ability to work with AI. I think a lot of times we're seeing it as an either or, and it's a false dichotomy. And it's very much a both and a growth together. And actually, this kind of brings me back to something that my mom has told me for decades, and that is bloom where you're planted. And it's taking what you have around you and those resources, whatever it looks like. And I think AI is one of those resources, and bloom with it. So the resources that you're going to need and use and take in different directions with AI probably going to be very different than what I do with, say, business communication and education. But again, staying on top of it, being curious. I think that is one of the biggest things that we can do. We talk about what are our options, staying curious, critically thinking about it, trying things out, and not just leaving it at one specific piece, right? I don't have to just do this once and say, okay, this is as far as I can get. No, this is just the beginning, and that's going to build into something and something bigger and something bigger. And so I see it as this, I almost call it a silver thread, right? Of where AI is going to take us through our connections with each other. Yes, it's going to help us bring us closer together. Maybe it's going to help us learn how to people again. Maybe it's going to help us learn how to work with people from very, very different backgrounds. I think that's an amazing and wonderful thing, and opens up conversations that quite honestly might not have happened otherwise. It's going to give us opportunities to think through puzzles like this that we may not have considered otherwise, and to bounce ideas back and forth with it. I don't know how many late night conversations I've had online AI. It's like, yeah, okay, I'll come back to that. But really using everything that we have put into AI as people, as humans, pulling that back out and using it to quite honestly better ourselves. So I see it as a way that we're going to keep going forward with this. I'm a realist also. I know there are some significant challenges that we're going to be looking at, but come on, we have Pittsburgh potholes. We can deal with this as well, right? For those who don't know, the Pittsburgh potholes, you can live in them. But these are challenges that we are well equipped to handle. And I love that we're having this chance to challenge ourselves in this way. And I actually see it as really kind of this next step in kind of moving forward in our own intellectual growth and opportunity. So that's kind of where I'm thinking, where we're potentially going with this, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, because embracing and then trying to leverage this as part of what we're trying to do is the approach that we are getting there, but it's still not a problem that we can solve immediately. We have to keep doing it and then see where it goes. Let's go on to our last section. This segment is called Game Break, This or That, the Carla Bevins edition. So I'm going to give you two words, which you can pick one of that feels more you.
Ooh, okay.
I'll give you a few options and then we'll just go through it.
Sure. Sounds good.
First one, precision or persuasion.
Ooh. I'm going to go persuasion.
Okay. Next one, writing or speaking.
Actually, the writing comes first. I was a writer first.
Okay. Oh, this is related to what we've already kept discussing. AI assistant or human brainstorm.
Ooh, human brainstorm first. Absolutely.
Data or narrative.
Narrative. Absolutely. The data is part of the narrative, but the narrative has to be there.
Wait, can you explain the data is part of the narrative? How do you see that?
Absolutely. Yes. So it's a story, and there are different parts to the story, and the data is just a piece of that narrative. I talk about sticky stories, and here's your persuasion piece for the day. People remember things better when there is a statistic and a story together. So I can tell you statistic, 20% of something, right? Okay, you may remember that. But if I say 20% of, we're going to talk about my flowers because they're behind me at the moment. 20% of my flowers are going to still be here and beautiful at the end of the week. And it's because I specifically am giving them a special formula of flower food, making things up at the moment, right? But when you put that story with a statistic, it's called a sticky story, and we're much more likely to remember it and be persuaded by it. So the data is just a piece of the story and the narrative, a very important piece, but it's not the only piece.
Last one, humor or gravitas.
Oh, gravitas. Absolutely. You have to use humor the right way. And when you do, that actually increases the gravitas.
Brilliant. Carla, thank you for sharing your insight and stories today on the Stories and Wisdom podcast.
Pradeep, it's been my absolute pleasure, and thank you for having me. And I really look forward to seeing what you're working on with the Stories and Wisdom in the future.
Absolutely. And for listeners who want to learn more from you or explore your work, where and how can they connect and learn?
You can always reach out to me at the Carnegie Mellon University. My email is cbevans@andrew.cmu.edu. I always put that in the notes as well. Or connect with me on LinkedIn at Carla Bevans. And I'm looking forward to having more conversations and continuing to talk about a lot of the ideas that Pradeep, you and I brought up today. So please reach out. I definitely want to people some more.
And absolutely, like your work, and I met a lot of your students over the years, and they often say, like, great communication isn't just what they say, but it's about how they connect with others, and words is one part of it, but there's so much to the thinking, strategy, the leadership, the context with which they bring that. So thank you for showing us how we can merge timeless skills with future-facing skills, with current and exploring technology, and to help prepare the leaders of tomorrow so that they can people better.
You are very welcome. Thank you so much for having me. As you know, you cannot not communicate.
Absolutely. To everybody listening, thank you for listening to the Stories and Wisdom podcast. We'll be back with some more stories, questions, and wisdom from some great guests. Thank you.
Playfulness and curiosity.
This new superpower called
They're
persuasion.
the rules of the world, and then here's the rules for us.
Real deep pain.
That was a very different level of inequity.
What does rich mean?
Stories and wisdom.